The morning after I married Nora Merritt, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched when I saw the dust rising down the road. I knew that dust. Mr. Aldrin's carriage. Black frame, 2 gray horses, the kind of rig that only showed up when somebody owed somebody else a reckoning. I set the cup down on the railing and watched it come. Nora was still inside. I could hear her moving through the kitchen, the particular sound of a woman who decided she didn't need to make noise to announce herself. 3 days I'd known her. Long enough to learn that. The carriage slowed at the gate. Mr. Aldrin stepped down before it fully stopped, the way men do when they're carrying news they think is urgent. He had a leather satchel under one arm and his hat in his hand, which meant the news wasn't good. I didn't move from that chair, didn't call out to Nora. I'd known this moment was coming. I'd known it since the day I signed my name next to hers at the courthouse. Longer than that, if I'm being honest with you, and I'm trying to be honest. That's the whole reason I'm telling you this story at all. There are things a man hides because he's ashamed, things he hides because he's afraid, and then there are things he hides because he's decided, somewhere deep and quiet, that the truth would cost more than the secret. I was wrong about that last part. That morning, watching Mr. Aldrin walk up the porch steps with that satchel, I understood exactly how wrong. To explain that morning, I have to take you back 3 weeks. I was sitting on a bench outside the county land office when Nora Merritt walked in and tried to renew her federal grazing lease. I wasn't there for anything in particular. I'd been doing day work at a ranch 2 miles east and stopped in town to cash a voucher. The land office was next to the bank. I sat down to wait out the midday heat. She walked past me without looking. Most people did. Inside, I could hear her through the open window. The clerk, a man named Turnbull who wore the same brown vest every day of his life, was explaining, in that particular tone of voice bureaucrats use when they're enjoying themselves, that the federal lease renewal required a male signature. Husband, father, or authorized male agent. Nora's voice was steady. She explained that her father had passed 8 months prior, that she'd been running the property alone since then. That the lease was in good standing, every payment made on time, and that she didn't see what her marital status had to do with her grazing rights. Turnbull repeated himself. That was all he knew how to do. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She walked back out past me the same way she walked in, without looking, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment with her hand flat against the wall, like she needed something solid. Then she walked away. I didn't follow her. I sat there and finished waiting for the heat to ease, cashed my voucher, and thought about Nora Merritt for the rest of the afternoon in a way I hadn't thought about anyone in a long time. 2 days later, she came to find me. I was mucking stalls at Garrett's place when she appeared in the stable doorway. She looked at me the way women look at a man they're not sure about. Measuring, practical, slightly impatient with herself for having to be there at all.
You were at the land office 2 days ago, on the bench outside.
I was.
Then you heard.
Enough.
She didn't waste any more words on it than that. She told me what she needed, a name on the lease renewal. A legal husband, at least on paper. The arrangement would be simple. She'd file the paperwork, he'd sign, they'd go their separate ways before the ink dried. She wasn't asking for anything else. She said it the way you'd negotiate a fence repair. Nothing apologetic about it. Nothing romantic. Just terms. I asked her one question.
Why me?
Because you were there and you didn't say anything. Any other man in this town would have offered to help before I was back on the sidewalk. You let me walk past. That told me something.
I thought about that for a moment. Then I told her I'd do it. She didn't thank me. She gave me a time and a place and left. I stood there in that stable with a pitchfork in my hand and something moving around in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. The courthouse ceremony was exactly what she'd promised. A clerk. A judge who was already thinking about lunch. 2 signatures on a form that took 4 minutes to process. Nora signed first. Neat, confident, not a moment's hesitation. I picked up the pen and held it over the line just a beat longer than I should have. She noticed. I felt it. She thought I hesitated because I wasn't sure. I hesitated because I was too sure, and I knew even then that certainty was going to cost us both something before it was over. Back to that porch. Back to Mr. Aldrin and his satchel. He didn't sit when I offered. Men who sit down expect a conversation. Men who stay standing think they're delivering a verdict. I called Nora's name through the screen door. She came out a minute later, drying her hands on a cloth. She looked at Mr. Aldrin, then at me, then back at Mr. Aldrin. He told her as gently as a man like that could manage that he was there in his capacity as an officer of the county court, that he had documents pertaining to the validity of the marriage registered the previous day. Then he told her about Bess. Her full name was Elizabeth Caine, born Fowler. We married in the spring of 1882 in a town called Dalton, 2 counties east of here. She was 21. I was 23. We had 1 good year before she got sick. The sickness moved fast. By the 2nd winter, she was gone. I left Dalton the following spring. Left everything. The house, the furniture, the small plot of land her family had given us as a wedding gift. I put distance between myself and that town the way you put distance between yourself and something you can't fix. And I never filed the death certificate. There was no one left to file it for. No one who expected anything from me. I told myself it was grief, and it was partly. But it was also guilt. The particular guilt of a man who survived something his wife didn't, and couldn't find a reason that made any sense. Mr. Aldrin laid the documents on the porch railing. Under county law, the marriage between Eli Caine and Nora Merritt was invalid. The previous marriage, never formally dissolved, took legal precedence. The lease paperwork she'd signed was void. Everything she'd come to that courthouse for was gone. Nora stood very still through all of it. She didn't look at the documents. She looked at me.
How long have you known?
I didn't answer. That was its own kind of answer.
I see.
She went inside. The screen door didn't slam. She just let it close behind her, and somehow that was worse than if she'd taken the hinges off. Mr. Aldrin picked up his satchel, told me the court would expect a formal response within 10 days, and walked back to his carriage without another word. I sat back down with my cold coffee and stayed there a long time. I deserved every second of that silence, and I knew it. If you've stayed this far, a like tells us this story was worth it. And let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let me tell you what happened next. She appeared in the kitchen doorway that afternoon. Didn't come fully in. Stood in the frame like she hadn't decided whether she was staying or going.
You should have told me before I signed anything.
Yes.
That's all you have to say.
There's more. I just don't think now is when you want to hear it.
She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she went back into the kitchen. She wasn't wrong to be angry. She'd come to me with a practical problem and a practical solution, and I'd let her walk into something she didn't have the full picture on. What I hadn't expected, and couldn't have told you I was capable of feeling anymore, was how much it hurt to watch her realize that. Nora Merritt was not the kind of woman who waited for someone else to solve her problems. The next morning she was up before I was. By the time I came downstairs, she'd already gone to town. I found out later she'd walked the 2 miles rather than ask me to hitch the horse. At the county clerk's office, she went through the marriage records herself, page by page, until she found what she was looking for. Bess's death had never been registered in Dalton. But the county held a procedure. If a death could be verified through witness affidavit and 2 supporting documents, a physician's record, a burial registry, a church ledger, the clerk could issue a retroactive certificate, which meant the first marriage could be formally dissolved, which meant the second could be made valid. All it required was Eli Caine to file the paperwork. She came back in the early afternoon and laid what she'd found on the kitchen table. 2 sheets of paper, her handwriting at the top. Neat, no wasted space.
You had years to do this. Why didn't you?
Because I didn't plan on marrying anyone.
That isn't an answer.
She was right. It wasn't. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say standing there in that kitchen, was that filing those papers meant making Bess's death official in a way her memory still didn't feel ready for. That doing it now, for the purpose of fixing a different marriage, felt like reducing her to an administrative obstacle. A problem to be cleared away. I know how that sounds. I'm not asking for understanding. I'm just telling you the shape of it as it actually was.
I'll think about it.
The look she gave me could have stripped the paint off a barn wall. She left the 2 sheets on the table and went back to her room, and I sat there looking at them for the better part of an hour without touching them. Outside, the afternoon went about its business. The horses needed water. The fence on the east line had a post that had been leaning since before I got there. None of it got attended to. I just sat at that table and thought about what it had cost me to keep Bess's death a private thing and what it was costing me now. She went back to town the following day. This time to the bank. I learned what she'd been doing 2 days later when Garrett mentioned it to me with the particular satisfaction men take in delivering information they think will cause difficulty. Nora had been asking around about Mr. Harlan. Harlan was a name people in this county said carefully, the way you move around furniture in the dark. He'd built himself a commercial operation over the past decade, cattle trading, land leasing, freight transport, legitimate on the surface. Under it, a different kind of machine entirely. He'd bought out 3 smaller ranches in the past 2 years, not by force, but by pressure. He'd find a man in debt or a widow without leverage, and he'd make an offer that wasn't quite an ultimatum but felt like one. He understood, better than most men, that people didn't need to be threatened. They only needed to feel surrounded. He was patient. He could wait a season, 2 seasons, until the numbers turned against whoever he'd been watching. Then he'd knock. Nora's lease had been on his list. I knew that before she ever came to that stable. I knew it because 6 months prior, Harlan had mentioned it over dinner. He was always mentioning properties, always assessing what things were worth to someone other than the person who currently owned them. Harlan and I had been partners for 4 years. He handled the public face of the operation. I provided the capital. It was an arrangement that had worked well for both of us, and one that I had taken apart, quietly and cleanly, the day I married Nora Merritt. She found out about the partnership from the banker. She came back to the house that evening quieter than I'd ever seen her. Stood in the doorway of the sitting room where I was reading and looked at me like she was recalculating everything she thought she understood.
You ruined a 4-year partnership for a woman you'd known 3 days?
I needed a moment
Why?
to think.
I put the book down.
I understand.
There was a version of the truth I could have told her right then. That Harlan was going to move on her lease the moment the renewal window opened. That the only way to stop him without a legal fight she couldn't afford was to make the lease untouchable. A married couple's joint holding was harder to contest than a single woman's claim under territorial law. That I'd watched her walk out of that land office and made a decision in the space of 10 seconds. One that I hadn't fully examined since. I could have laid all of that out for her. I chose not to.
Some things aren't worth explaining to someone who's already decided what they think.
And what do you think I've decided?
That I'm someone who makes moves and doesn't show his hand.
Aren't you?
I didn't have an answer for that. After she went upstairs, I stayed in that chair and listened to the house. There's a particular quality to a place where 2 people aren't talking. Every small sound lands differently. The clock, a door settling, my own breathing. The trouble with being a man who holds things back is that eventually there's no room left for anything else. I'd been telling myself I was protecting people, but protection that keeps someone in the dark isn't protection. It's just control dressed up in better clothes. I understood that, sitting there. I just didn't know yet what to do with the understanding. Nora came downstairs just before midnight. I heard her on the stairs and didn't move. She went to the kitchen, and I heard the sound of water being poured, and then silence. Then she appeared in the doorway of the sitting room with a glass in her hand, and the look of someone who hadn't been sleeping either. She didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway and looked at the fire.
I went to see the banker today. Not just about Harlan, about you.
What did he tell you?
That Eli Caine hasn't been in Millhaven long enough for anyone to know him well. That you came with references nobody could trace, which is unusual. That you were quiet, kept to yourself, and paid in cash, which people noticed. He said the only man who seemed to know you at all was Harlan.
She picked it up, carried it to the kitchen, poured it out and put the kettle on for fresh.
Thank you. For last night.
She looked at me then. Not with suspicion, with something more like calculation, the face of a woman assembling a picture from pieces that kept coming out larger than she expected. She nodded. Didn't say you're welcome. Didn't make anything of it. Just took a sip of her coffee and kept looking out the window, and the morning came on the way mornings do. Slow and indifferent and, occasionally, generous. I'll tell you what I've taken from all of this, for whatever it's worth to you. That's all honesty ever really gives a person. Not comfort, not safety. Just a clear view of what you're actually standing in, so you can decide what you want to do about it. She went back upstairs. I sat with the fire until it went out. Outside, the wind had been building for the better part of an hour. The kind of wind that doesn't announce itself until it's already decided what it's going to do. I should have checked the sky before I went to sleep. I didn't. Mr. Harlan came on a Thursday. No warning, no letter. He rode up to the gate on a horse that cost more than most men made in a year, with 2 of his men trailing behind. He tied up at the post like he owned the place, which in his mind was probably a reasonable place to start. I was by the water trough when he came around the side of the house. I didn't move toward him. I waited. He took his time crossing the yard. Harlan always took his time. It was a performance he'd been refining for 30 years, and he knew it still worked on most men. He told me, pleasantly enough, that he was surprised I hadn't come to see him after ending things so abruptly. That after 4 years, a man might expect at least a conversation before his capital simply disappeared. He said he wasn't there to cause trouble. He was there out of courtesy. Then he said that Nora's investigations around town had come to his attention, and that he thought it might be useful, for her sake, he said, for her sake, for her to understand exactly what kind of man she'd married. I told him to leave. He looked past me at the house, past me, at the front window, where the curtain had been shifting since he arrived. He said he'd already spoken to her. Not to me. To her, through the glass, that she'd heard everything he'd needed her to hear. Then he put his hat back on and rode out with his men. I stood in that yard for a moment. Then I turned and looked at the house. The curtain in the front window had shifted. She'd heard all of it. That I wasn't a drifter or a dairyman. That I owned land in 3 counties under a holding company registered in a name different from my own. That the capital behind Harlan's entire operation had been mine for 4 years. That I'd let her believe I was a man who mucked stalls for day wages. All the while I was quietly being something else entirely behind walls she couldn't see. I went inside. She wasn't in the front room. I found her in the kitchen, standing at the window with her back to me.
Nora.
Don't?
Let me explain.
I said don't.
She turned around. I'd expected anger. What I found was something quieter and more serious. The look of someone who's been wrong about something fundamental and is now accounting for exactly what that cost them, line by line, without drama.
You financed the man who was going to take my land.
I ended that before any of this.
Before or after you decided I was useful?
That one landed hard. I didn't answer. The honest answer was complicated, and the moment was wrong, and she wasn't in a place to hear complicated. She went upstairs. I heard her moving around, opening drawers, pulling things from hooks, the unmistakable sound of a woman deciding what to take with her. I went up after about 10 minutes, knocked on the door frame. She was standing by the wardrobe with the dress folded over one arm and the look on her face that said she hadn't decided I'd earned a conversation yet.
If you're leaving, I won't stop you.
I know you won't.
But I'd like you to know something first.
She waited. She didn't put the dress down, but she waited.
Harlan was going to move on your lease. Not someday. This spring, when the renewal window opened. I know exactly how he would have done it because I watched him do the same thing to 2 other properties, and I helped him build the machine that made it possible. I knew what was coming for you before you ever walked into that stable. Ending the partnership was the only clean way to make your lease untouchable without starting a legal fight you couldn't have afforded.
A long silence.
You could have told me that the day I came to find you.
Yes.
Instead, you let me think it was a simple arrangement.
Yes.
And you thought that was protecting me.
She said it without contempt. That was almost worse. She was just naming it, holding it up to the light so I could see it clearly.
I thought it would be easier for you not to know what you were walking into.
Easier for me, or easier for you?
I didn't have an answer to that. She finished folding the dress, set it in the bag on the bed, but she didn't close the bag.
I'm not leaving tonight. It's too late to go anywhere. But I'm leaving in the morning.
All right.
And I'd appreciate it if you didn't spend the night finding new ways to explain yourself.
I went back downstairs. The fire had burned low. I put another log on and sat there and let the evening go wherever it was going. Outside, the wind had picked up. That particular warm-cold mix that meant weather was changing somewhere not far off. I should have checked the sky. I was too tired. The storm came at 10 o'clock without any further warning. The wind hit hard. I heard the stable roof before I saw anything. That specific crack of old wood under lateral pressure that tells you a beam has given way. I had the stable door open in under a minute. 3 horses inside, all of them already panicking. I got the first one out clean. The second took longer. She'd backed herself into the far corner and wasn't going anywhere on principle. I heard footsteps behind me. Nora had come out in her coat over her nightclothes, her hair loose, already wet from the rain. She didn't ask what needed doing. She looked at the situation once, read it, and went straight to the 3rd horse, the youngest, the most frightened. She talked to him the way you talk to something that doesn't speak your language, but understands your tone. Low, steady, certain.
Get him to the far gate.
I know.
We worked for 40 minutes in the dark and the rain. A section of the roof came down on the east side, close enough to feel. At one point, a crossbeam gave way, not where we were, but close enough that the sound hit before the wood did. The young horse felt it before either of us. He went up on his hind legs without warning. Nora was right there. She went sideways and I caught her, one hand on her arm, one at her back, pulling her clear. We stopped. Rain coming down on both of us. Her hand on my sleeve. Neither one of us moving. Then the horse pulled the lead rope taut and the moment broke, and we went back to work. After, we were in the kitchen. Wet, exhausted, not talking. She'd found a cloth for her hair and was sitting at the table with both hands around a mug. I put the kettle back on and stood at the counter looking at the wall. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't hostile anymore. It was the kind that settles in after something has been decided, even when neither person has said out loud what the decision is.
I don't need your money. I never did.
I know.
She held the mug with both hands and looked out at the rain still dripping off the eaves. I stood at the counter and didn't say anything else. There are things that happen between people that don't need explaining once they've happened. 40 minutes in that stable, working in the dark side by side. Something had shifted in the weight of the air between us, and we both felt it, and neither one of us was ready to name it yet.
I'll figure out what I'm doing in the morning.
She went upstairs without waiting for an answer. I put out the lamp and sat in the dark for a while, listening to the rain ease off and the frogs start up in the low ground past the fence line. Then I went to bed. She was awake before dawn. I heard her upstairs, not hurried but deliberate. The sounds of someone who made up their mind the night before and is now just following through. A drawer. Footsteps to the wardrobe. The soft weight of something being folded. Set aside again. I made coffee. Left a cup at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't take it. At first light, I put on my coat and walked to town. 2 miles in the early cold, the road still wet from the night's rain, the air carrying the smell of damp cedar that comes after a hard storm. I didn't take the horse. I needed the 2 miles to think, and I used them. What I arrived at, by the time the county clerk's office came into view, was something simpler than I'd expected. There was one thing I could still do that was honest. And it didn't require her to be there, and it didn't require her to forgive me anything. It just required me to do it. The clerk who handled vital records was a young man named Pettigrew, the kind who smelled of ink and didn't ask questions, which made him the best kind of bureaucrat I'd met in years. I told him what I needed. He found the procedure, laid out the forms, and set them in front of me without ceremony. I sat down and wrote Bess's name, Elizabeth Fowler Caine. Date of death, February the 14th, 1883. Location, Dalton. Cause, respiratory illness, attending physician on record with Dalton County. I had that physician's name memorized. I'd known it for 6 years and never once written it down anywhere until that morning. Pettigrew stamped the form. Said the marriage between Eli Caine and Nora Merritt was now legally valid, pending the state record clearing within the week. I thanked him and walked back out into the morning. What I felt wasn't relief. It was something quieter, the particular weight of a thing that has been waiting a long time to be done, finally done. Bess deserved a line in a ledger. She'd always deserved that. I was the only one who'd been standing in the way of it. I hadn't even known that's what I was doing. I walked back toward the ranch with my hands in my pockets and the sun coming up over the ridge, and the meadowlarks going at it from both sides of the road, and I tried to figure out what I was going to say to Nora. I didn't figure it out before I got there. The cup was still at the bottom of the stairs, cold. The wardrobe in her room was open and mostly empty. A few things left on the hook, things that weren't worth taking. The window was open a crack, the curtain moving in the morning air. I stood in that doorway for a moment. Then I put my coat back on and went to the station. There was only one train out on Thursdays. It left at 9:30. I had 20 minutes by the time I turned onto the main road, so I moved faster than I'd been moving and arrived with the platform still half occupied. A family with 3 children and more luggage than they could manage. 2 men in suits reading separate newspapers. A woman selling apples near the far end who'd set up her basket with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been doing it for 30 years. Nora was at the very end of the platform with a single bag at her feet, looking down the track in the direction the train would come from. She was wearing the same coat she'd worn in the storm the night before. There was a button missing from the collar she hadn't replaced. I walked to within 10 paces of her and stopped. She heard me. I don't know how. I was never a loud man, but she turned before I said anything. Her face was the prepared kind arranged in advance for whatever I might say.
Why are you here?
I don't know. I just couldn't not be.
She held my gaze. The train whistle sounded somewhere in the distance. 5 minutes out, maybe 6. I told her what I'd done that morning. Pettigrew. The forms. Bess's name in ink with a date and a place and a physician on record. I told her the marriage was valid now, pending the state record, which would clear within the week. That she could leave as a free woman, because I would sign an annulment without contest if she wanted one. Or she could stay as a married woman. But that I wasn't going to stand on a train platform and tell her which one to choose.
You came to me with a problem and asked for a practical solution. You never once asked me to make your decisions. I don't know when I started thinking that was mine to do.
She didn't say anything for a moment. The whistle again, closer. She picked up her bag, put her hand on the iron rail at the boarding step. I didn't move forward, didn't reach for her, didn't say her name.
If I stay?
She stopped, looked down at her hand on the rail, then back at me.
If I stay, it's not because of your land. Not your money, not your name on my paperwork, not whatever it is you think you protected me from.
I know.
You showed up here with nothing. No argument. No plan. Just here.
That's all I had?
That's all I ever wanted from anyone.
She set the bag down on the platform boards. The train pulled in. Doors opened. A conductor called the departure. 3 people boarded. The family with the luggage got organized and moved. The 2 men in suits folded their newspapers and walked on without looking back. Nora Merritt stood on that platform and watched the train leave without her. The dust settled over the tracks. The platform cleared out slow. The apple seller packed up her basket, said good morning to no one in particular as she passed us, and made her way toward the street without breaking stride. We stood there, the 2 of us, in the particular quiet that follows a decision that can't be walked back from. I didn't touch her, didn't say anything for a long while. Then she picked up her bag, turned, and started walking back in the direction of the ranch. I walked beside her. The road was drying in the morning sun. The rails caught the light behind us and held it. Somewhere off to the east, a meadowlark was doing its level best with the new day. It went through its whole repertoire like it had an audience worth impressing. Nora almost smiled at it. Almost. We didn't talk much on that walk. The 2 miles back to the ranch went the way those walks go when something large has just happened and neither person is ready to name it yet. You just move. You let the road do the work. At some point, without either of us making a decision about it, she shifted the bag from her right hand to her left. I took it from her without asking. She let me. That was the first thing she'd let me do for her without pushing back. It wasn't lost on me. When we got back to the ranch, the coffee I'd made that morning was still on the stove, cold and forgotten. She looked at the cup at the bottom of the stairs. Still there, still full.
You made coffee before you left?
Left it for you. You didn't take it.
I know.
She picked it up, carried it to the kitchen, poured it out and put the kettle on for fresh. I sat at the table and watched her move through that kitchen like she'd been doing it for years. She hadn't. She'd been in this house for 4 days, counting the morning we were married. But some people learn the shape of a place fast. Some people are just made to occupy rooms without apology. Nora Merritt was that kind of person. She set a mug in front of me without being asked. Then she sat down across the table and wrapped both hands around hers and looked out the window at the morning that was getting on without any help from either of us.
Thank you. For last night, with the horses,
They needed looking after.
still.
She nodded, didn't say you're welcome, didn't make anything of it, just took a sip of her coffee and kept looking out the window, and the morning came on the way mornings do. Slow and indifferent and, occasionally, generous. I'll tell you what I've taken from all of this, for whatever it's worth to you. There are men who hide what they have because they're afraid it's the only reason anyone stays. And that fear, if you let it run long enough, will make a liar of you every time. Not because you mean to deceive, but because you've decided, without asking what other people can and can't handle. You think you're protecting them. You are in fact deciding for them. and there's a difference between those two things that matters enormously. Nora didn't need my land. She didn't need my money or my name on her paperwork or my quiet arrangements with the county and the lease office and the partnership I'd ended on her behalf. She needed the truth of the thing, not a version of it I'd decided was safe to give her. That's all honesty ever really gives a person. Not comfort, not safety, just a clear view of what you're actually standing in so you can decide what you want to do about it. Nora decided to stay. She made that choice with both eyes open, knowing everything there was to know, on a platform with a train pulling away and nobody asking anything of her. That's the only kind of staying that counts for anything. The kind that's chosen, not settled into. The kind where the person could have left and didn't. They stayed because they wanted to be there. I've thought about that morning more times than I can count. I think I always will. Everyone has decided at some point that the truth would cost more than the secret, that it was easier to let someone believe a smaller version of you than to risk showing the rest. Eli did that. Most of us have. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been there?